Hi, I'm John Prasinos, editor-in-chief of Aircraft Value News. I'm also a contributing editor at Avionics International Report. Welcome to my video presentation posted February 3rd, 2026. With me to shed light today on the latest developments in cockpit capabilities is Robin Glover-Faure. Robin flew fast jets for the UK's Royal Air Force, then spent 20 years as a pilot for British Airways. He is currently Chief Customer Officer at Akron Aviation. He previously served as president of L3 Commercial Training Solutions. Robin, thanks for joining me here today.
Good afternoon, John. Delighted to join.
Avionics technology, it's an intrinsic part of aircraft valuation. Generally speaking, what are the key avionics innovations that you expect to transform the commercial cockpit in 2026 and beyond? And how will these innovations affect aircraft appraisal and lease pricing?
Well, John, we at Akron Aviation, our mission actually is to innovate to create safer skies, and that's really what we do. We're a avionics technology company, and we have been in that business now for well over 30 years, producing flight data recorders and surveillance. But I think the future really is about surveillance and the technology that can be developed in the existing suite of surveillance. Airlines will have a multi-layered safety management system. All airlines do, but there are always gaps in information, gaps in that system itself. And one of the prime technology items that I think will go forward, we already have in part, called ADS-B in and out. The out is already on board aircraft, that's mandated. It's the ADS-B in that I think is the future and will give pilots much more information and start to close some of those safety gaps that we see in some of the safety management systems.
Robin, as a courtesy to those who might be unfamiliar with the term, please give us a very concise definition of ADS-B in, which is an acronym for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast In.
Yes, and I recognize the acronyms can sometimes be confusing to your audience. And but what it effectively is relatively quite simple. It uses an existing avionics box on board the aircraft, and for some time now we have broadcast additional information from the aircraft. This is where the language of out comes from. The information goes out of the aircraft. That information is, for example, the GPS position, the velocity of the aircraft, the heading direction, the altitude. This information is broadcast and relayed by satellites, by ground stations to air traffic control. Air traffic control have primary radar, but they have secondary information, that information that is broadcast out of the aircraft to enable more information, greater situational awareness. ADS-B in is taking that technology and bringing it back into the flight deck. What does that mean? That means in addition to sending out your own information as an aircraft in the flight deck, you can receive the information from other aircraft around you. This allows you to see an update every second, 360 degrees, the GPS position, the velocity, the heading, the altitude of all those aircraft around you. More information is always good information for pilots. It enables them to increase their situational awareness. But what we then do in a technology and an innovation space is we then start to develop algorithms. We start to develop the capability of the ADS-B in so that it can feed into instruments on board the aircraft or the flight automation system, allowing pilots to start using that information to fly more safely, more accurately, and start to do procedures that hitherto they weren't able to do because the information wasn't available.
Well, that was a great, concise explanation. Thank you very much. Regulators have talked for years about the benefits of ADS-B in, but airlines live in the world of downtime, checks, and budgets. If an ADS-B in mandate does emerge, what do you think the retrofit reality will look like for short-haul and long-haul fleets? And how disruptive or manageable is this likely to be compared with past surveillance or connectivity upgrades?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, John. And we recognize that, of course, the industry is concerned about that. What I'd say, in short, the disruption compared to previous mandates is significantly less. We've worked in partnership with American Airlines, who announced just last week that they're going to install ADS-B in to the whole fleet. And we've been working with them now for several years. And let's use their experience. The way that American Airlines have updated their fleet is primarily through the A check. It's sequenced it in the A check, aircraft's down 3, maybe 4 days maximum. And the software, and it's predominantly a software update. There is a little bit of hardware. There's an additional gauge on the Airbus 320 that we've installed for American Airlines called the Aircraft Guidance Display. So a little bit of hardware, but all of that can be installed in the normal sequence of the A-check. So we think the disruption is minimal. Yes, it does require planning. For example, American Airlines have planned 302 of their aircraft over the last few years as they've updated the whole fleet. So we anticipate that partnership that we have with American Airlines can be replicated with other airlines. And of course, we're here to support. We have training material for the pilots, training material for the ground crews, so that we support our airline partners every step of the way in terms of implementation.
You know, aircraft appraisers and lessors are increasingly sensitive to avionics divergence within a fleet. Do you see ADS-B in becoming a value-enhancing differentiator for aircraft or a value risk for those that are late or non-compliant? And how quickly could that gap open in real market terms?
Yes, well, I speak as a pilot. I think the sooner this technology is adopted, obviously the benefits become more apparent. And I think on that basis, it's definitely a value enhancing update. Yes, for safety, but also for the capacity that it creates. For example, American Airlines have found through a trial at Dallas Fort Worth that they were able to achieve 0 infringements of the safety separation limits that aircraft use as they approach airports, but an increase in capacity. That capacity at peak times was as high as 5 additional arrival slots per hour into, in that case, Dallas Fort Worth, a busy airport. So we see the early benefits, safety, but also capacity being very real and very obvious. It's also the case that the closer any fleet will get to the mandate, the risks of planning the implementation and ensuring that the equipment is on board in time for the mandate starts to draw to that point you're raising, which is there are some risks if you leave it late and if you leave it close to the mandate. Our anticipation is that most airlines will want to get ahead of that and plan out the implementation over the period that the regulators are likely to allow.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, ADS-B in is often described as a way to unlock airspace capacity through tighter spacing and better trajectory management. From your perspective, where are the most realistic capacity gains and where might expectations run ahead of what airlines and air navigation service providers, ANSPs, another acronym, can practically deliver in the next decade?
Well, I think the capacity and the enhancement of capacity is a key component of ADS-B in. Pilots become collaborators with our colleagues in air traffic control. They become reactive to the ADS-B out. They are reactive to air traffic control's instructions. In ADS-B in, they are proactive. They can start to anticipate. They can work with air traffic control because they have information. What does that mean in reality? It means that, for example, the safety separation, whether that's time or distance, is flown precisely. Not in any way are those limits reduced. In fact, as I said before, we had 0 infringement of the limits, but they are flown more accurately. And because they're flown more accurately, the flow is increased because there are no wasted miles or wasted seconds. The aircraft is flown by the pilots using the information under the instruction of air traffic control, absolutely precisely down the approach lane, down busy air corridors between for example, the East Coast corridor. And that saving of time, that precision of flight increases the capacity. There are also procedures that we've developed and have been trialed by American Airlines, for example, CABs, where another acronym, I'm afraid, where aircraft follow the aircraft ahead in visual conditions, but use the ADS-B in to give the pilots confidence of maintaining that separation. And they are therefore more inclined to accept those type of clearances, which we know increase the flow rates into airports. So as the technology is adopted, as we train the pilots, adopt the procedures, there are many ways that ADS-B in can actually increase the capacity of our existing airspace.
Well, you know, the fact that you're actually a pilot gives a lot of credibility to your remarks in this interview. As a former RAF pilot and airline executive, how do you assess the real cockpit value of ADS-B in traffic and intent information? Does it materially change pilot decision-making in busy terminal airspace and oceanic operations, or is its greatest benefit more subtle than many expect?
No, I think again we should look at experience and always a degree of skepticism amongst the pilot community. Whenever you bring in new technology,
Right.
pilots will always test whether or not it's going to add or take away. But what we found with American Airlines is that once the pilots had become comfortable with the equipment, follow through on the training, they immediately took to the additional information that ADS-B gave them. And I guess the best testimony would be if we were now to take it away from them, what would they say? In most cases, they say to us, don't take it away. We really value this information. We can see our situational awareness is much, much higher than it was before. We can work with air traffic control. We can preempt situations where we can see the speed of the aircraft ahead is not what it should be and then preempt that. So there are lots of ways that a pilot can operate in a safer but also more efficient way. And our experience so far is pilots absolutely take to it extremely well.
We've been speaking with Robin Glover-Faure, Chief Customer Officer, Akron Aviation. Robin, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. That was a great interview.
Thank you, John. My pleasure.